what he has seen with his own eyes 2 miles down under ice
are strange carved symbols that an archaeologist studied. That was his mission. What if the greatest discovery in human history isn't buried in the sands of Egypt or hidden at the bottom of the ocean, but hidden under more than 2 miles of Antarctic ice? For many years, Antarctica has been one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It is a frozen continent where military missions, science trips, and off-limits areas have caused endless rumors. Most of those stories were seen as make-believe. But after more than 40 years of collecting people's stories, Linda Moulton Howe says she can't stay quiet anymore. Based on stories she collected from former investigators, Navy workers, scientists, and intelligence officers, they all described the same amazing thing. A huge structure with straight lines and shapes, buried deep under the ice. Something that didn't look natural but built on purpose. The deeper they explored, the stranger the stories became. Stories about sudden evacuations, radios going silent, blocked-off locations, and papers people had to sign promising secrecy for life. Before we share what investigators say they found under Antarctica, hit like and subscribe because you won't want to miss what comes next. Now 81 years old, Linda says the proof and the stories people told her are simply too important to keep hidden any longer. Whether these amazing claims are true or not, they have kept alive one of the biggest mysteries ever connected to Antarctica. The man on the ridge. The year was 1982. A Navy flight engineer, whose name Linda has kept secret to this day, was on a normal supply trip from McMurdo Station to a faraway research camp deep inside Antarctica. Somewhere over the ice, a machine problem forced the crew to land early on an open ridge. Wind was slamming against the plane. It was so cold that any bare skin would get frostbite in seconds. It was the kind of place where you fix what's broken and then leave right away. But while the crew worked on the repairs, the flight engineer looked out across the ridge and stopped. Something looked wrong about the land. On a hill far away, shapes stuck out against the sky that didn't belong there. They were straight-edged, evenly balanced, and too neat and sharp to be shapes made by ice. He walked closer, close enough to see what looked like the top of a huge structure, partly uncovered where wind and time had worn the ice away. It had sharp angles. It was solid, and it was made of something that clearly wasn't natural. Before he could reach it, the radio crackled. The order: return to McMurdo right away. No explanation, no discussion. When they landed, intelligence officers were waiting. The crew was split up, questioned one by one, and told their flight records were now top secret. They signed more secrecy papers and were given one instruction: this never happened. Now here's what you need to know about Linda Moulton Howe. She is not someone who just makes up wild stories for a YouTube channel. She is an Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter who has spent more than 40 years talking to military members, scientists, and government officials. She built her career on solid proof, checked facts, and sources whose stories could be backed up. When the flight engineer contacted her in 1998, retired in his 70s and knowing he didn't have much time left, she didn't rush to share his story. She interviewed him for hours. She checked his military service records. She confirmed his background. His story included exact map coordinates, exact dates, and the names of other crew members on that flight. Everything matched up. But Linda knew one witness wasn't enough. So she put his story away, told no one, and waited. She had no idea what was about to begin. If this is already giving you chills, hit subscribe because what comes next makes this seem like nothing. The pattern. Over the next 20 years, people came to her one after another: military members, scientists, workers, people who had no connection to each other, who had never met, and who had been stationed at different bases in different decades, all telling Linda pieces of the same unbelievable story. A geophysicist who had run ice-scanning radar tests sat across from Linda with a tight jaw and a voice barely above a whisper. He had found huge empty spaces under the ice, not small pockets but massive gaps shaped in perfect patterns, far too deep and too orderly to be natural caves. When he pointed out the readings, his supervisor's face turned pale. The information was made top secret within hours. His whole team was moved to a different job. He never saw that data again. A Navy construction worker described being sent to a secret dig site far from any official research station. There was no science briefing and no ice sample mission, just drilling straight down. And at the bottom of the hole he saw something that made his stomach turn. Metal structures, walls that looked man-made, surfaces too smooth, too exact, and too perfect to be natural rock. He stared at them and thought, someone built this. A scientist from Argentina's Esperanza base told Linda that research teams sometimes pulled objects from ice samples dated to more than 12,000 years old. Every single time, military people showed up, took the samples, and made them disappear. No records, no reports, no published papers, gone. A pilot who flew missions across the continent described a no-fly zone that wasn't on any public map, an entire restricted area where regular flights were forbidden and military flights needed clearance levels that almost nobody had. When he asked a supervisor what was down there, the answer was short: sensitive research. Stop asking. None of these people knew each other. None of them had heard Linda's other interviews. But every story pointed to the same conclusion. Something ancient and built on purpose was buried under the Antarctic ice, and more than one government knew about it. Linda sat with all these stories spread across her desk and felt the weight of what she was holding. This wasn't just one story. This was a pattern she couldn't ignore and couldn't yet prove. But then someone contacted her who changed everything. The story that changed everything. It was 2016. Linda got a message from someone she would later call the most believable source she had ever interviewed in her whole career. He was a retired NORAD officer with top-secret clearance who had taken part in an Antarctic mission in the early 2000s that isn't in any public record. His identity is the one Linda has protected more carefully than any other. When he began talking, Linda went quiet because what he described didn't just add to the earlier stories, it connected them. Every separate account, every piece, and every unexplained detail from 20 years of interviews suddenly fit together like puzzle pieces snapping into place. According to what he was told and what he personally saw, deep under the West Antarctic ice sheet at about 2 miles down, there are several structures that are man-made, not natural rock shapes, not ice formations, and not anything you'd find in a geology textbook. These are structures built by someone, made with purpose and precision. And they are old, much older than the ice that buried them. They date back before the last ice age, meaning they were built when Antarctica was a warm, green continent with rivers and forests, more than 12,000 years ago. Let that sink in. Over 12,000 years, that's thousands of years before Sumer, thousands of years before the first Egyptian kingdom, before every civilization we've ever called ancient. He told Linda these structures were first noticed in the 1940s during Operation High Jump, the huge 1946 to 1947 Antarctic expedition led by Admiral Richard Byrd. Officially, the mission was about setting up research bases and training people for cold weather conditions. But according to this source, the real, secret reason was something else entirely. Ground scanning tests had picked up strange signals deep under the ice that no one could explain and no one was supposed to talk about. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Since then, for more than 70 years, the United States, Russia, and more recently China have been running secret recovery missions across Antarctica. Not research but recovery, digging up artifacts and gathering technology, done completely separately from the public science programs that operate under the Antarctic Treaty. The structures, he told Linda, aren't small. They aren't just one small outpost. What has been found appears to be a large city-like complex with buildings, systems, and technology, suggesting a civilization so advanced that it challenges everything we think we know about human history. Some areas can be reached through natural ice caves where shifting glaciers have opened up paths. Others are being reached through drilling missions disguised as normal scientific research. And the technology being pulled from these structures. Pay close attention to this, some of it still works. Not all of it is understood, but working devices have been recovered and are currently being studied at top-secret facilities. Linda asked the question any reporter would ask: prove it. The officer gave her map coordinates. He gave her internal documents, blacked out in parts, but showing secret project names at the exact locations he described. And he gave her names. Other people involved in these missions, people she could find, people she could call. But the thing Linda couldn't stop thinking about was the silence in her own mind. 20 years of scattered stories had just become one single story. And that story was bigger than anything she had ever looked into. What she didn't know yet was that the most disturbing story was still coming. What they found. A military contractor who worked on a secret drilling job in 2003 agreed to talk to Linda, but only because he was dying. His cancer was in its final stage and he couldn't take what he had seen to the grave. He described being lowered down an ice shaft that had been drilled to reach what his briefing called a geological oddity. The trip down was slow. The platform creaked under his weight as it dropped deeper and deeper into the shaft, foot by foot. The daylight above shrank to a small, bright dot, and then disappeared completely. The walls were ice, white, streaked with blue and plain. The cold was total. The only sounds were the hum of the machine lowering him and his own breathing echoing off the shaft walls. Then, more than a mile down, something changed. The ice stopped, not slowly, it just ended. The walls turned into something smooth, almost metal-like, a surface with a faint shine that caught his headlamp's light. A surface that had no business being a mile under an Antarctic ice sheet. The temperature felt different. Even the sound felt different. Even the air felt different, like stepping from one room into another. He stepped off the platform into a huge open space that was clearly not natural. The area opened up around him. It was enormous. There were markings on the walls, symbols and geometric patterns unlike any writing system anyone on his team had ever seen. The team stood in silence, their flashlights cutting through darkness that hadn't been disturbed in thousands of years. And then he saw it set into the far wall, a doorway. Not a crack, not a gap, a built entrance, framed and clearly made on purpose, leading somewhere deeper. His hands were shaking. He could feel his own heartbeat in his ears. The team wasn't allowed to go any further, that needed a clearance level none of them had. But he watched as scientists and military members in special suits got ready to go in. They moved with the calm confidence of people who had done this before. He was sent back to the surface. He was paid a large bonus. He signed a secrecy agreement that threatened him with criminal charges if he talked. And he kept what he saw a secret for years, until his cancer diagnosis made keeping the secret feel pointless. He told Linda, "People should know we found something down there, something that changes everything we think we know about history." Now listen to what else Linda's investigation turned up, because the stories didn't stop. They picked up speed. A satellite image analyst told her he had watched certain Antarctic locations get digitally erased from public data, not just made blurry but actively hidden, smudged out, and removed. He had seen the original images before they were changed, straight-line shapes and formations that looked man-made. He sat at his desk staring at structures that shouldn't exist. And when he brought it up with his bosses, he was told those areas were under special rules and it wasn't his business. A materials scientist who briefly studied samples from Antarctic recovery missions described metals that matched nothing in any known database. Their resistance to rust was off the charts. Their strength compared to their weight shouldn't be possible. The way they were made showed signs of manufacturing that today's technology can't copy. A logistics coordinator for the NSF's Antarctic program found equipment records that matched no known research mission. Heavy digging tools, sealed shipping containers with armed military guards, and shipments sent through Department of Defense channels completely outside of normal science oversight. Every new witness added something even more unsettling than the last. Symbols carved into walls that no language expert on any team could figure out. Electronic equipment that malfunctioned near certain dig sites, with instruments spinning wildly and giving strange readings from electric interference with no clear source. And then the claim that shook Linda's entire network. Several sources separately confirmed that recovered artifacts had been sent to secret U.S. facilities, not to be studied but to be copied and figured out piece by piece. The picture was no longer made of scattered pieces. It was enormous and it was screaming to be told. But telling it meant risking everything Linda had built over 40 years. The silence. By 2020, Linda had more than 15 believable stories, checked map coordinates, confirmed names and job titles, all together pointing to one of the most important secrets in modern history. And then her sources started dying one by one. The people who had trusted her with the most dangerous secrets of their lives were running out of time. The Navy flight engineer, the man on the ridge, the one who started all of this with a phone call in 1998, died in 2019. Linda got the news and sat with it in silence. Then the NORAD officer, her most important source, the man whose single story had connected 2 decades of scattered accounts into one huge picture, died in 2022. Others were fading fast in hospital beds and hospice care, with memories slipping away. And Linda, now in her 80s, understood something with painful clearness. She was becoming the last person alive who held all of these stories together, the last thread connecting the witnesses to the world. That realization changed her. It didn't just push her forward, it scared her. Because if she waited any longer, 25 years of investigating, the life's work of a dozen dying men who chose truth over silence, would disappear as if none of it had ever happened. She said in a 2023 interview, "I realized that if I didn't tell this story completely, with all the details and all the sources I could responsibly name, then it would die. These men trusted me. I have a responsibility to make sure their stories survive." In late 2023, she began putting together what she calls the Complete Antarctic Report. Every story, every coordinate, every mission name, every piece of proof gathered across 25 years of investigating. And in early 2024, she shared parts of it through earthfiles.com. She published exact coordinates where witnesses reported seeing uncovered structures or ways underground. She shared declassified Operation High Jump documents with blacked-out sections hinting at goals far beyond just research stations. She shared unnamed witness interview transcripts with enough background detail to seem believable. She gathered satellite images showing data that had been artificially hidden over the exact areas her sources pointed to. And she made a direct challenge. Other countries have satellites. Independent researchers have ice-scanning radar. Scientists work on that continent every single day. If these stories are true, the proof is out there. She told the world where to look. Now here's the part that keeps me up at night. The response from every government involved was the same. Total, complete silence. No corrections, no lawsuits, no charges, no official statement of any kind. Nothing. Just silence so complete it felt done on purpose because it was. Think about that. A longtime investigative reporter publicly accuses several world governments of running a 70-year cover-up involving ancient structures and recovered technology under Antarctic ice. And not a single government says a word. Not one denial. Not one press release calling it fake. Linda says that silence is the loudest confirmation she could have gotten. If she were lying, proving her wrong would be easy. One official statement would end it. But responding to her investigation would force a choice no government wants to make. Either admit what she's revealing, or explain why dozens of believable military and science workers are all separately making up the exact same story. So they say nothing. And the silence grows louder. Independent researchers started digging. Amateur satellite analysts looked at her coordinates and reported strange findings. Scientists asked for old radar data from the areas she named. Most requests were turned down, marked as classified for national security, for geological data, from a continent that's supposed to be dedicated to peaceful scientific research. One former Antarctic station worker came forward publicly to support Linda's claims, saying what anyone who has worked on that continent for a long time already knows. There are places you don't go, questions you don't ask, and secret military operations that have nothing to do with science happening right alongside the research programs the public sees. What it could mean. What makes this story so interesting isn't just the claim that something might be hidden under Antarctica. It's what that possibility could mean for how we understand history. If even part of these claims were true, they would challenge the whole timeline of human civilization as we know it. Instead of knowledge growing slowly over thousands of years, it could mean that an advanced understanding once existed, was lost in an ancient disaster, and is only now being rediscovered. According to Linda Moulton Howe, this is why so many witnesses eventually chose to speak. She says many were military members, scientists, contractors, and intelligence workers who claimed they had seen unusual structures, unexplained technology, or secret operations connected to Antarctica. Most stayed quiet for decades, afraid of losing their careers, breaking secrecy agreements, or simply being laughed at. As they grew older, many said they could no longer keep their stories to themselves. Linda says she spent years writing down every story, recording interviews, gathering supporting information, and checking the backgrounds of the people who reached out to her. She is now working on a documentary that brings these accounts together for the first time. She has also given copies of her investigation, including stories from witnesses who agreed to be named after their deaths, to several institutions to help preserve the material. She says her goal isn't to demand blind belief, but to encourage people to look at the stories and decide for themselves. In her view, these were real people with real professional backgrounds, not random rumors from the internet. Most of those witnesses have passed away now, but their recorded stories remain. Linda believes she made a promise to share their stories after decades of silence. The biggest question, though, still remains. If governments really knew about mysterious structures under Antarctica, why keep it secret? And if evidence of a lost ancient civilization was being studied behind closed doors, what else might still be hidden? Whether these claims are true, mistaken, or exaggerated, they continue to feed one of the world's most fascinating mysteries. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and share it with someone who loves mysteries, hidden history, and unexplained discoveries.